MNC. I'm a math and economics graduate from Wellesley College, a women's college in the US. And I'm a Phi Beta Kappa Omicron Delta Economics Honor Society, part of WAI India, India Education Council, and now also part of India AI platform. And I'm passionate about, promoting AI literacy to our youth, to our women. And I want to personally share that, one of my goals is also women empowerment. So our company Coding and More is all women run, where we help women upskill and give them an opportunity to teach work from home, flexi time. Because I know that sometime in our career we have this guilt of trying to manage work life balance. I've been through it. I want to help other women where they can live a life of purpose without the guilt. So that's about it for me. And if you like, I can share my screen. And between Janaya and me, we got the time zones warped. So I'm not fully there. So please bear with me if I am missing a beat. So may I share my screen and start? Also, any place, if you don't understand me or you'd like me to go slow or anything, please stop me. Let's keep it informal and fun. And I'm going to share my screen. Give me a sec. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I'm just going to make this full screen. Okay. So ethical AI design. So before we go into ethical AI design, can somebody tell me what you think when I say what is ethics? Anybody wants to? How would you define ethics? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our own definition of what is ethics. This is why I would like to know your perspective.
I can.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to call out on a person.
I was going to say that ethics is a set of principles that we understand as governing how we think and behave in a society, as regarding what's acceptable behavior morally. So it's dependent upon your society, and it's a subjective definition. And I don't think ethics means all the same thing to every person.
Thank you. I am so glad you gave the disclaimer. The disclaimer stands true in, throughout my talk. You mentioned that, some people believe that ethics is something that is governed by society, but does that make it right? Because, different societies would have different ethics. Does anybody have a different take on what ethics means to them? Anybody?
Yeah, in case of research, we think about how genuine your research is, that represent the ethical work, and you don't copy from others, that kind.
Yeah, so correct. I understand that definition also. And yes, there would not be much gray over there because you're talking about plagiarism. So, often people associate ethics with society norms. Sometimes they associate it with what is legal. Is it ethical if it is legally binding? Some people associate it with, the intrinsic conscience, right or wrong, how it makes them feel. Some people associate it with religion. But is that really right? Is it completely right? So a definition that I liked about ethics was actually taken by Ethical Design Institute from University of Santa Clara. It will come up in my talk later. They said that ethics should be defined in a twofold way. that it should be fair to all, irrespective of your society or community. The reason we should not associate it with society norms, because there was a time when genocide was acceptable in a certain part of the community. Does that make it right? Abortion, or the right to keep your baby or not, it doesn't depend upon which society you're in. It depends upon what is fair. So ethics is a lot gray. And so I think the first thing is that it should be fair to all. And the second thing is that there should be some standard of reflection and evolving, so that you don't sort of say that this is what I think ethics is, but we should keep introspecting and saying that how can we make this a more robust, fair system for all. So having sort of designed ethics, I would go into what is ethical AI design. And I really like this definition, which says that it is an ethical human-centric AI must be designed and developed so that it is aligned with the values of a society or community effects. And I think that now with our world becoming a global village, you cannot have it geographically constrained, right? And the second standard that it says is that it should be well-founded on standards of right and wrong, what humans ought to do, and you should constantly introspect on it. I also wanted to just give another disclaimer that today, ethics in AI design, there are different definitions of it. I have taken primary of my research from IBM and Microsoft. So at IBM, they define it ethical design by 5 pillars: fairness, inclusiveness, reliability, security, and transparency. So let's start with fairness first. What does fairness in design mean? In my mind, when you talk about fairness in design, we have to be clear that today, if you are designing an AI model, obviously you will be not intentionally putting biases in the AI model, but unintentionally we put in a lot of biases, at different aspects. So that is something that we need to be mindful of. It should be equally accessible to people too. I'll give you some examples of how fairness has been coming up in the AI apps and how big tech companies are recognizing it and trying to make a change. In the news, you would have heard how when the data is being trained on one ethnicity, it is not able to recognize people of color, easily. And then if the AI gives you a biased answer, people of color have been arrested wrongly, maybe because the law enforcement people do not completely understand how the outcomes are coming about, right? So that is the impact of fairness. Another example is, from Joy. You might have heard of her. She's given the famous ED talk on entire women. Again, women in color, especially really, really well-known women like Michelle Obama, Serena Williams, they were Oprah Winfrey, were incorrectly, identified as male genders because the AI had not been trained, with enough data. So as UX designers, one has to be mindful that in every aspect of the AI design, are they being mindful of having all genders and ethnicities being covered? Do you all have any questions in that? Is that clear? Inclusiveness. This is a very, very interesting point, because again, when we are designing UX, keeping ethical AI in mind, it's very important that we, think ahead to be able to involve everyone. I have given a few examples here by way of pictures. So this particular image is from Twitter, where Twitter has been very, very mindful of being inclusive, where they realize that everybody does not speak English. So they allow the user to have different preferences of languages, not as translation tools, but as tools for them to be able to choose what tweets in which languages they would like to see. They went a step ahead by even having icons of different communities so that you can relate to the app. as a flip side, I was reading an article about an AI app called AI Gahaku, which turns your images into Renaissance paintings. But in that, people of color realized that even though it did that, it would make your skin tone shades lighter. Now, if our AI products are not inclusive, you would not be able to relate to it. And would you want to use it? Because at the end of the day, when we are designing products, we have to have design thinking in our process. We have to say, who is the user who I am wanting to make this product for? And then if we have a diverse team in our own process of deciding the product, we get a diversity of thought in the end result. So this was an example by Twitter. This example that I have showed over here is from Pinterest. Pinterest is another AI app that realized that, a lot of people use makeup and it is being used by women from all over the world. So they actually build that in so that even different people with different skin tones could personalize it for themselves. So if the designer keeps in mind that, we are going to be catering to a very diverse group of people, you can build in the functionality and make it more inclusive. Did you know, this is something I learned just today, that Microsoft in its new update actually has this particular checkbox where, just how you can do a spell check and a grammar check, you can even have a check which tells you that your document has any of these biases incorrectly, because today Gmail, Microsoft, they are all completing our sentences for us, right? So it's a way for us to tell them that, hey, this is incorrect. So I thought that was a really neat example of being inclusive. There are many such examples that we see now, how AI apps are becoming better to be more inclusive. So as you all decide to, make your projects for this hackathon, please keep in mind that there are people who may not think, look, or behave like you. And inclusiveness also includes people who are differently abled, right? And so it's small things like, having voiceovers, for people who are not able to hear, or, people who have vision disabilities, to have small functionalities like that go a long way in making your UX design more inclusive. The third point I would like to speak about is reliability or safety. Why do I have a picture of a Titanic now in a UX design? Does anybody want to tell me what this means in the UX design with ethical AI?
It was a false promise.
A false promise as in?
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Why do you think I have linked unsinkable Titanic with reliability safety in the UX design? What is the link?
I think there's always something that's unforeseen with reliability. Nothing can be 100% reliable or 100% safe. And so for that to be guaranteed to somebody is not necessarily true 100% of the time.
Correct. So now today as a UX designer, how would you safeguard yourself for reliability?
Oh, yeah, I can take that question. So it means my understanding of reliability is that you present the things the way they are and identify the risk in presenting what you are presenting, what you're focusing.
Yeah, so that point actually comes under transparency. That is true that, one must do that, so that all your assumptions are out there. But in reliability, the example that I would like to give is that even if your model is showing you that it's got a very high rate of accuracy, 99% accuracy, and you're like, oh my God, this can never fail, right? So you don't build any safety nets around it, because you're so sure that it is unsinkable, it's unbreakable. but nothing is perfect. Because once the AI model runs at scale, you don't know what will break. So it's always important to think about all the unforeseeable and fix it. When we know that a system is broken, we are careful. We keep a watch. You have the human interaction on, right? But when you think that somebody is infallible, you let your guard down. And that's what you don't want to do as a designer. You always want to think about the unforeseen, no matter how perfect a system looks. But the point that you made is definitely a very integral part of AI ethics, and it comes under transparency. You know, in safety, two examples that I can talk about is an autonomous driving cars, right? Today we have the technology, but yet we are not using it, you know, in all parts of the world. Why is that? Because the researchers realize that even one mistake is a costly mistake, right? When you have voice assistants, they also can fail because they may not be able to always tell you most appropriate content, because when apps were designed, they were designed keeping a certain age in mind. But now, even the youth is using apps which are actually designed for adults. So even that comes under reliability and safety. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Security. Now this is a big one. You know, privacy is so important. We all on a connected device are giving data. Data is collected for our personalization, but are we giving the data for personalized ads? Are we giving the data to be sold to third party, you know, organizations? No. So this is something that, you know, as designers, we should be mindful that how can we have, you know, the data privacy inbuilt into a design. It's not good enough to just put it in the fine print, right? Because the average consumer doesn't have the bandwidth of reading it in the fine print. So I think it is our responsibilities as creators of technology to be more mindful and treat others like we would like to be treated. We are going to use those apps too, right? You know, look at the example of all our voice assistants. They are in our homes, they're listening to us all the time. Most people don't realize that. They think they're only spoken to when you call it out, but they are listening. So, how do we protect the consumer? And we must also allow them to give an option of opting out when they don't want the app to be zooming in, right? So that's another thing that I think is very, very important as part of ethical AI design. Transparency. I think, Tehniat, would you like to rephrase what you had said, because that exactly comes in here. That is important again here in ethical AI design, that each and every person who is involved in making the AI product, from the design to the purpose to the use, you know, we make it very, very clear to the consumer, the end user, what was the purpose. You wanted to say something, Tanya? I'm sorry.
No, I'm good. You're explaining it well. Thank you.
Okay. So it's very important for every person who is involved in making the product, whether it is from the person who's given, you know, the requirement that this is what we need to produce, from the person who's designing it, coding it, using it, the actual person who's going to make an impact with it, and the environment, that everybody recognizes that what were the assumptions that went in to make this app, what was the data that was collected, what are the algorithmic biases that may be in place, and if there are any flaws, what could they be. A lot of companies are very wary of sharing this because of proprietary rules, but it can still be done without disclosing all your proprietary code. But it is important for the explainability to be there in order for you to be fair to the community that you're building for. Here I'd also like to share that there was an example that I read where Facebook realized that advertisements were being made on targeted groups because they were able to choose the race and do targeted advertising. They decided to remove the race checkbox so that the advertisers could not do targeted advertising. However, that was circumvented by looking at interest or racial preferences proxies. So it's not always possible to get around all the proxies, but it's important to think about how you are in a circumspect way giving away a person's cultural or ethnicity or gender preferences and allowing them to be targeted or eliminated, when they have to get a credit loan, etc., even though race or ethnicity or gender is not a part of the sort of checkbox. You have to still be mindful that how can I protect the end consumer to the best of my ability. Does this example make sense to all of you? I don't know whether I've explained it well enough. Anybody wants me to clarify it?
Yes, please. Can you, Supriya, can you please explain a little bit more about that point you just made?
Yeah. So I'll explain to you by way of two examples. So the first example is through Facebook, where Facebook realized that, earlier advertisers, they could choose to advertise to a particular race, their product. So they removed the race checkbox from the preferences. But then the advertisers were able to, through the feed, of the users, through the preferences that you choose when you sign on to Facebook, you choose that, what are your interests. They were able to still identify people according to their race, depending upon their interests, right? So even though Facebook saw that, they were not able to eliminate or even inform the user that they're still getting targeted marketing, or they're being eliminated from buying certain sort of houses or getting credit loans, because they were still being identified by their preferences. For example, maybe people of black color may like hip hop music, so that's an indicator that these are the races that I want to go to. Another example was in recruiting apps. This has actually happened with Amazon, that there was a flaw in the algorithm where it was hiring more men than women. And even though the gender was not one of the specific checkboxes, there were certain words and certain activities that men tend to put in their resume which women didn't, and that made the AI app flawed. So it's important as designers that we catch on to these other nuances which sort of creep in unknowingly. Does that make more sense?
It does. Thank you.
In fact, there was another article I read that, given the recruiting apps, the users realize that these are the catchwords that the AI app looks at in order to get you in front of the queue. People started using those hashtags, so to say, in order to be selected by the AI, right? So I think that also comes down to the fact that, AI and human interaction has to go hand in hand. These are not things that, you can just leave a machine to do, and it's good to have a human interaction. But that's what's my point for transparency. The first, which I just described, those are the 5 pillars that have been identified by IBM as what they consider the 5 pillars of ethical AI design. However, With that, I also looked at, how, sorry, that was by Microsoft. I also looked at how IBM does that. And in the case of IBM, they are very, very strong on accountability. What does accountability mean? When an AI design is done or app is made, who is responsible according to you?
Can you repeat? Sorry, can you repeat your question?
My question is that let's say you're part of a design team and you're being told to work on a particular AI product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the outcome is, who is accountable for that AI product? Is it the designer? Is it the coder? Is it the person who collected the data? Is it the person who said that, this is what we need to make in our company? Or is it the person who is actually using that AI app and making his decisions? Who, according to you, is accountable? Yes, Emily?
I think accountability should be shared across all of the people who have a part of the who are part of the creation of the AI, because there's potential for failure as well as success across every piece, from deciding what kind of data to keep or not keep, how to train your model, how to test your model, as well as how the users are going to use the model.
Correct. And the outcomes that would happen to the environment because of the decision that the user has made, right? So every single person in this chain is accountable. And that is something that we all must recognize. And which is why the more diverse the team, the chances of failure or biases are less, right? Because you have more diverse views. Value alignment, extremely important, right? Because it comes back to the concept of fairness. You define who your user is. What are his pain points? And as I speak, I realize that I've put a pronoun here, which is something that, again, we have to be mindful of, right? Inclusivity. Think broader, keep introspecting that, am I including everyone? Am I having an alignment of values across the board? Where can this fail? How can I circumvent it? Right? Be transparent. Admit, be humble. I actually also wanted to share the ethics canvas with you. This is a lovely, sort of a board where when you are designing your AI app, it actually gives you a place to put down all the different aspects of what goes into the ethical reasoning of designing the app. So once we're done with this, I will just put it in the chat box and show it to you. And as I mentioned earlier, Emily, you had a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I don't have a question. Thank you.
Okay. Actually, your hand was up, so I got confused. I'm sorry about that.
Apologies.
No worries. And of course, awareness building is a part of ethical design, both for ourselves and for communicating it to the community, right? And in the heart of all of this is design thinking. I come back to the same point that identify the problem statement, identify the user, so you actually have impact. I didn't realize that this was my last slide. I'm sorry. But if you guys have any questions, please do ask me. I'm going to quickly escape from this and show you the ethical canvas because I thought that was really, really neat. Give me one quick second. And I'm going to just put it in the chat for you all to see. Did you all have any questions? I don't know whether this was useful.
I do have a question. So regarding the ethical design of AI, you mentioned autonomous vehicles. So I know that we're working on AI applications in autonomous vehicles, as well as life-saving healthcare devices and things like that. So in both of these cases, you know, of course, there's the potential, if something goes wrong, that there's a loss of human life. And at least with the autonomous vehicles, assuming we're in a position where, let's say you have to collide with something. You know, this brings us back to the trolley problem. So this takes us back to the societal concerns. You know, if you have the option of you have to collide with a child or you have to collide with an elderly person, for example, which choice does that car make? Or if you have to prioritize life-saving devices or care in a hospital setting, you know, it's the same thing, just the transplant problem. Do you foresee there being a guideline for recognizing the dangers of these tools, but also, or not the dangers, well, the potential risks of these tools, but also how we can design them such that we are able to represent the various needs or various values in different societies and use them with respect for their applications as well as their risks. I mean, like, autonomous vehicles can be dangerous, but who's to say that they're any more or less dangerous than an average human driver, who is of course fallible and I would argue more dangerous than an autonomous vehicle. It's a perhaps imperfectly trained machine. I know that this is a difficult question to answer, but do you have any insights as to where you see that going in terms of the direction for AI and ethics for these sorts of applications?
Yeah, that's a really neat question and a difficult one. And, you know, in my mind, you know, you said that, of course, you know, there is an argument that a human driver is at more risk of failing than the autonomous vehicle. But, you know, the scary thing is that when a human makes a mistake, he does it spontaneously. He doesn't do it willfully. The trolley problem makes you realize that you are intentionally programming, right? Or making a choice beforehand in case a mistake would happen. In my mind, I hope that our society doesn't go to that point where some human decides intentionally beforehand that if he has to make a choice between one life and the other, which one it should be. I believe that is why the human in the AI is always going to be at the center, and it should remain so. If autonomous vehicles have to become a widespread, you know, it has to be used, you know, over a large scale. In my mind, I think that society would demarcate, you know, places where it would be 100%. And even as I say this, I can realize that how I'm setting up myself for failure, because nothing, as I said, is ever 100%. So Emily, you've got me in a full-on catch. But I have to tell you something. One nice thing that I noticed is the technology that has been developed for autonomous vehicles is being put to really good use. Because now that technology is being used, you know, in the Roombas, is being used in the waitresses. I was in Austria last week and I had the pleasant surprise of an autonomous Kathy waitress come and serve us a meal. So maybe the technology is not completely going to waste. And she circumvented passing patrons very sweetly with a nice little apology. So I know I'm not answering your question fully because I'm not really sure. Because I know
I don't think there is an easy answer. I mean, I guess my question, I agree with you that there's got to always be the human in the loop there. But as we're moving towards more automation and deep learning techniques, obviously we're going to have to, regulations now already require certain things regarding transparency and explainability. But I mean, to bring these things to scale, is it going to be, I don't know that it's going to be possible to have a human involved at every step of the way. Eventually, these things are going to, you know, if we ever approach the singularity, we're going to have these things essentially teaching themselves. We just have to decide that whoever is teaching the teaching initially is diverse. I wasn't really expecting a clear answer, but you did a great job of providing the existing applications of these tools. That's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. You can put it in the chat, Janaya. Did anybody get a chance to open the ethical canvas? I thought that was a really nice resource if you'd like to use it in the hackathon. Also, you know, in case anybody needs any good resources with they like to further their readings, I can send it to Janaya if you want to sort of read up a little more, because you know, I do know that the whole ethical AI design is evolving and there's no one concrete definition. So you know, it's always good to take it from different resources and sort of make sure that you are being as holistic as possible. I think Reshmi saying that she still cannot get how to open the resources and how to proceed. The link is not opening, Reshmi, is that what you're saying? Is the ethical canvas not opening?
I don't know where is that? Like, I didn't get any.
Yeah,
What
it's
to
chat. I put it in the Zoom chat. I'll just resend it. There.
Okay, yeah. I didn't get this link. Thank you. I just got the Coda and Slack link, but those are not opening anything.
No. I just sent it right now after my presentation. Should I open it and show it to you? Are you able to open
Okay.
it now?
Yeah, I got it now. Thank you.